this is Tanya from Flying Dog Studio. Thank you so much for joining me for part 2 of the Derwent Inktense Watercolor Experiment. If you haven't watched part 1, I do recommend that you hop off of here and hop back on and take a look at that before you go forward. I will link that down below, so take a look in the description below. We have already laid the base colors down in part 1, and I'm coming back here in part 2. I started with some tangerine and put it on top of a leaf where I had previously had some poppy red that I colored on just like I'm doing now, put the water on top of that, let it dry, and then I also added some sun yellow. So I didn't just add a layer and let it dry and then add another color. I am putting down more than one color at a time, and that's what I'm going to do as I build these up. I'm going to put down more than one color at a time to allow these colors to blend together. What I'm doing for the water, I'm being very careful. I'm learned as I started doing this and started adding more water onto the piece, more color onto the piece, that I would get my brush wet, and many times I would have to go back and touch my towel to get the extra drops off. See, you saw me do it right there, because if you put it on and you have too much water on your brush, it will cause the ballooning where the water is and just make all that color spread out where you don't want it to go. So then you have to kind of dry your brush and go back in and fix all of that. So I recommend that you tap your brush, get the excess water off, and then proceed forward. So I'm going to be going back and forth, and I'll show you my colors as I go through and put those on. And sometimes I do hold them up backwards, and I will get those switched around so you can see what the colors are. And I'm going to just let you watch me color. I'll come back on in a few minutes and tell you what I'm doing. If you watch part 1 of this series, then you heard me talk about this deep indigo. It is a very strong color, and I learned that from my color swatching when I first started working with the Inktense pencils. When I did my unboxing, I did the swatching, and I realized it was a dark, dark color. This particular leaf had some shadow on it, and it also had sort of a purple, I would say, on it. So I wanted to indicate that. So I was very careful to go ahead and add those in. I'm not really ready to put the shadows in. That's the last thing we're going to do, but I wanted to kind of build that up. So again, we're experimenting with this project because I'm not a pro at these Inktense watercolor pencils. So I'm starting with the red. Even though both red and the deep indigo were dark colors, I wanted to go in kind of slowly, and you can see what's happening here. It is going super dark, and it was dark in the leaf. At this point, I was starting to panic just a little bit, but I thought, nope, we're going to go with it. I'm not going to pull any color up, because when you're using watercolors, and these are no different than regular watercolors, even though they're ink-based, once they dry, they get lighter. So I was banking on this getting lighter, and I went ahead and left it, and it turned out just fine. And as you can see, where the red and the deep indigo came together in the center of that leaf, the part we just previously worked on before this little section, they blended together very well. So again, make sure you don't have too much water on your brush so that you can mix those colors really well when you're wanting them to blend together on your paper. So this little leaf was a bit tricky. This was the one that I said in the first video we would come back and we use the green and we would use the blue, well, we've used the deep indigo, and now we're using the apple green. It was a bit tricky because we have some strong colors and we have some not so strong colors. So what I'm doing is I'm starting with the apple green, which is not as strong, and then I'm working on to the next color. So I'm going to the orange and I'm allowing those to sort of blend together, bringing those edges together, and tapping, and always moving in sort of a circular motion to activate that color. And now I'm going to come to that red, because that poppy red was one of our super strong colors when we did the swatching. So I was careful not to put a lot down, and I was coming back actually with my brush with a little extra water on it to kind of pull up some of that color. I didn't want too much of that red, even though, as I just said, stuff dries a little bit lighter. Those reds are super dark, and I did not want it to overtake that beautiful green that's in there. But I think that this leaf worked well, and I thought that the orange and the green went well together. And I don't know if it was because it was the cold press, but if you'll notice, that red did not bleed over into the green. I wanted that orange and the green to blend together, and I was able to get those to work together, but the red thankfully did not bleed over. So that was a happy thing that I found out. Since the last leaf that had the green and the orange on it worked well together, I thought that I would do this one a little bit differently and start with the strong color side, which is the poppy red, and then work with the non-dominant color side and see how that worked. If I could start with the dark color and then move to the light, because in the other leaf I did it just the opposite. The trick to it is to rinse your brush before you go to the next color that you're wanting to activate. So when I finished with the poppy red and went to the side that's the yellow orange, I went ahead and rinsed my brush, worked on that side, and then I decided I wanted them to blend a little bit more. So instead of coming from the red side and pushing it down to the yellow-orange side, I started more on the yellow-orange and pushed it up to the red, and then that allowed those two to blend in the middle. I'm wanting to work on this leaf right here, and I'm taking a look at my reference piece, and I'm wanting to find the exact color. So I pull out my swatching chart and I take a look at baked earth and realize the colors that I can mix together. So I'm going to take baked earth and I'm going to take that poppy red, and I'm going to put the poppy red down first because it is a stronger color, and I want to make certain that I can see it on the paper and know that I'm not putting too much down. But since baked earth is not quite as strong, I'm going to add a little bit more of that. So I only want a touch of the poppy red. So that's how I solved that with the poppy red being strong. I put it down first, and now I'm coming back with the baked earth on top. wanted to save some drying time on here, so instead of doing leaves that are touching one another, you'll notice that I skipped a leaf and I'm working on this one now because I didn't want these colors to mix together. I didn't want to mess up the leaf that I'd already done. So I'm working on this one and you're going to see me skip around between these leaves. This leaf had actually quite a few colors that I'm putting down on it, and they were all not strong colors, so it didn't really matter where I started as far as putting the water down. I did want to be careful on the brown that I have at the top of the leaf, not to really mix that into the center. So you'll see me being careful on that part of the leaf. But if you were doing this with regular watercolor, if I were doing this with just my regular Winsor & Newton, which is what I normally use, I would probably put down one color and then come back and layer darker colors on top. I wouldn't be laying them down like this all at the same time. But I thought, since this is colored pencil, I want to take advantage of the fact that I can lay those colors down and actually mix them together on here and see how that will do. And I didn't really want a lot of that green up there on top. I wanted mainly the browns and the yellows and the oranges that you see mixing together. So just another way to experiment and see what was going to work for me. But I did like doing it this way, so when I do my next one, I'll probably do some of this technique in that as well. So we are coming to the final leaves on this particular part number 2 of our series. And I think this will be a good place to kind of let everything dry and come back and add some more layers in part 3 and 4. But if you've ever read the book When You Give a Mouse a Cookie, that's what we're going to run into on this. So I've done the background, and now that I've done the leaves, they are so super bright, I'm going to have to come back and work on my background. And these leaves were bright. They were this bright in person. So, and plus working on that red is getting outside the line just a little bit. So I'm going to want to come back and give a mouse a cookie and work on the background. So we're going to work on that in the next couple of videos. I hope you have learned something from this. I know I learned some stuff working on it and experimenting. I appreciate your being here and following along with this watercolor journey and learning how to use these pencils. If you have any tips or tricks, if you've worked with these, please put those in the comments below so we can have a community that learns together. Thanks so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one.